I'm at, and we're going to scape this tank. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. Part 1 is where we go over the hardscape. I add all the hardscape you see in the tank. I go over some composition ideas for aquascaping, and then just go over how I like to organize things. So if you want to watch that, go watch part 1. Part 2 here today, we're just going to add the plants like you see here, and then I'm going to add this guy too, and you'll see how I did that and how we got to where we are now. So hope you like it. I'll see you over there. Alright, before we start planning, I'm going to be showing you this guy. So this is a Gundam from a show called Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. And this guy is actually one of the side characters. What's his name here? It's this is my favorite Gundam show. This is my favorite Gundam, I should say series maybe. Has kind of a wild ending. If you haven't seen that anime, you should check it out. But while I was in the Sequoia National Park, I was like, these trees are huge, they're awesome, but it would also be super cool to see a Gundam kind of walking around here. Yeah, this is my first Gunpla where I painted it. I've been making Gunpla for a while. My son and I make them together. That's kind of like our father-son time, I guess. But for this build, I'm using this guy, and I'll show you some close-ups, but I weathered him and stuff like that. I didn't do the most amazing job. Like I said, it's my first build. Yeah, I think it turned out pretty fun. In the show, this guy gets really beat up, so I did the same thing to him. Did a bunch of snipping and burning and drilling and stuff. Hopefully he looks pretty cool. I think he looks really awesome beat up like this. I went a little overboard, I think. I think if you're going to do it, less is more, and watching some other guys who are way better at me than doing this Gunpla stuff, they do an amazing job. Yeah, let me check out. I watched some videos just giving me a little bit of a guide. Let me see if I can find these guys. So yeah, big thanks to Giant it's Giant Robolove and Bound by Gundams. They have some awesome videos showing you just how to weather your Gundam if you're ever going to do that. Or I should say Gunpla if you're ever going to do that. And then I also took some techniques from Studson Studios. If you haven't checked him out, he's awesome. He's like the peak of making replicas. But yeah, once again, I think it turned out okay. We're going to stick this in the tank. So this Gundam actually does float. Let's see if I can show it here. So I tested it out before, but yeah, so I'm going to have to weigh him down just so that he stays in the tank. Like I said, this tank's going to be semi-normal, just being a normal aquascape, but then I'm also doing a lot of experimental things here. One of them's the burnt wood, the other one's the Gundam, and whenever I'm making an aquascape, I kind of like to make a story. You don't always have to add stuff like Gunpla in there or something. You can just have it normal with plants and hardscape. But having a story is actually really important. I think it really gives me direction on what I want to do with the scape. And then if someone's looking at your tank too, I think trying to portray a story definitely makes it more interesting. So for the story of this tank, in my head, was that the battle, the end battle, instead of having been in a desert like it is in the show, happened around Sequoia National Park. A lot of the burnt stuff was just because of the battle, and the burnt trees burned down because there were Gundam burning and sword battles and shooting crazy laser beams and stuff like that. So yeah, so this guy's going to be on the burnt side because he fell down and went down near the burnt side. Alright, like I said, he does float, so we're going to figure out how to get him to sink. I think I'm going to just glue some rocks to the back. with this super glue gel. Now I could use just normal super glue instead of the gel and just use some cotton or something, and then that'll merge onto there. But I think with this gel, it'll make it a little easier to fill in some gaps. And I'm gonna put it on the back just because you won't really see it. He's gonna be sitting down facing forward, so hopefully on the back it'll be hiding a lot of this stuff. So let's put one right on his rump here. And I am using rocks that I did use in the hardscape as well. That way it'll blend in a little easier. And hopefully you won't even notice that they're there. And they'll just look like they're just part of the hardscape. Now with the super glue gel, I'm using Gorilla Glue super glue gel. And it's my first time using it. I've used just like really off-brand, super cheap stuff. And I actually like the cheaper stuff more than this. I feel like this stuff separates a lot easier. So it like separates the gel from the super glue part. And I feel like it doesn't really glue down. You kind of see here. Just putting some globs on there. If you put too much, it'll take longer to dry. So the more you use, the longer it'll take to dry. Let's try putting one on his leg. And maybe that's all we need. Hopefully that's all we'll need. Look easy enough. See that? Put it like down here. See that? Alright, so we're gonna just glue those. We'll let those dry and then we'll see if he sinks. Okay, I just tested it. He does sink. Let's show you here. Dun, dun. Boom! Cool. Oh, let me move this mic. Is that better? I think that's fine. Now we can position him to be sitting on the rocks over here. So let's see if I can do this without getting the rock to come off. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. That's kind of a rough idea of where I wanted to be, or where I wanted the Gundam to be. I do think it's kind of cool that he's leaning up on the smaller trees on this side here. If you look closely, there's some like burn marks and stuff I put on the Gundam just to show that, hey, this is where the fire started. And that the trees burned down because the Gundam was kind of leaning up against them. Everything looks kind of lined up. He's kind of leaning over. I cocked his head over a little bit just so it looks like, you know, he's powered off. And then his ankle's a little twisted over to the side just so it looks like it's not too rigid. I think it looks a little more floppy that way. And then the Gundam also still is opened up so that it leads that way. But once again, obviously the Gundam's the main subject of this scape here. I don't even know if we call it an aquascape technically anymore since I put something weird in there, but I like it and that's all that matters, right? This is a scape for me, so I'm gonna do what I want. Yeah, so I think that looks super cool. I'm gonna drain some of this now, and that way I can glue the Gundam down, and then I can start adding some plants on it. I actually want it to look a little more aged. That way it looks like time has passed and some of the plants started growing on the Gundam and stuff like that. So in order to do that, I need to drain it. Excuse me. That way the super glue doesn't show up too white, and then I'll add some other stuff and then we'll just do the planting in general. So, yep. Let's get that going and let's get the planting going. Alright, so I got a Sometimes I just forget how to speak English. I don't even know a second language. Alright, so I finished gluing down the Gunpla here. And I just glued them here, over here and over here. Hopefully that's enough anchor points just to make sure that he stays in place. And I also covered the super glue with just some AQUASOIL here. And what all I did was I just took a group of it and then pinched it between my fingers and then squeezed it and rubbed it until, that sounds weird. And then I just sprinkled the AQUASOIL, and if you crush the AQUASOIL in your fingers, it'll just become powder, and that does a really good job at hiding the super glue. And if you don't have any water in the tank and you're doing everything really dry, then the super glue will dry clear. But if it's a little damp like it is right now, then the super glue is going to dry white. So that's why you have to cover it up, or else you'll see just white stuff everywhere. If you see this log here, I had some super glue. Can you see that? There. I had some super glue on it, and then it dried white because I got the log wet before I let it dry all the way. So we're gonna hide that. I'll show you how to do that right now. So we're just gonna put some of the gel on it. That's a lot. I like to use a little skewer thing here, and I'm just gonna spread it out wherever it is white. If you're gluing something together, you stick that piece on there right now. See that? I'm gonna take just a pinch of AQUASOIL, and then I'm gonna really squeeze and rub it together to break it up and become a powder. As you can see, it's becoming a powder. I'm doing this over the tank so it doesn't get everywhere. You don't want to do this too often or too much. If you have a big tank, do this on the side, because what's going to happen is this powder will end up kind of mucking up your water. If you're doing just a little bit, that's fine. It's not a big issue. But if you're doing it a lot and have a lot of like rhizome plants, or it's called epiphyte plants, then you want to do this on the side, because the powder will end up just floating around the water instead of staying in the soil, and then it'll make your water parameters all messed up. So but if you're like me, doing a nano tank and just doing it a little bit, not a big deal to do it above. Oh, I should show you. Like, okay, so now you can see how much better it looks, and it just looks like, oh, there's just some dirt on a log instead of the super glue. Put that back there. Close this up. Okay, so now I'm gonna look at the Gundam and see where I can put plants and where plants would just kind of naturally grow onto the Gundam. And for most things, if you've seen like an old car or an abandoned building, all the plants usually just grow in the cracks and crevices and anywhere that creates its own like natural bowl shape, because dirt ends up just collecting in there and then creating kind of a natural pot. So we're going to do that with this guy here. I'm going to be finding some places to put some AQUASOIL in, and then that'll just help the mosses or the whatever plants I put in there. It'll just help it grow. So all I'm going to do is actually just drop the AQUASOIL on top and see where it ends up going inside. And then we're going to exaggerate that. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to actually just break up a paper towel, because there's a little bit of a gap right here between his arm and the rocks. I want to fill up that gap with some plants, and they'll be, I want to kind of look like the plants are growing from here and then creeping their way onto the Gundam there. So Just gonna break up some paper towel, put some super glue on the rock. I just put the super glue on a spot. You're not really gonna see it from the front. I always have 2 pairs of tweezers, one nicer pair and then one junk pair, because it's really nice to have a junk pair to get super glue and dirt and stuff all over. I say one nice pair and one junk pair, but to be honest, I think they cost the same price. I just wanted to keep one looking a little nicer. Once again, just using the skewer to move the super glue around and get it attached to the paper towel. Just kind of fill up the gap. Make sure I don't have the end of the skewer on the table so it doesn't glue onto the table. I've learned that the hard way many times. Same thing with your tweezers or forceps. You don't want to leave them on the table. If I put super glue on this end and I put it on the table like this, in like 5 minutes you'll come back and try to pull it up and realize you have to rip the table up. And I'm using the gel right now, so it's a little chunkier. If you use the liquid, it'll kind of disperse itself into the Aquasoil, and that's kind of nice too. That way you don't have to play with it as much as I do. But the gel is sometimes easier to work with. I find you can really just make sure the super glue stays where you want it to. It won't kind of drip down anywhere. So that's the benefit of the gel over the just normal super glue. I found pushing the Aquasoil down like this in really small crevices really helps it keep in place. Like shrimp and snails and stuff really push your Aquasoil pellets all over the place. But if you jam them down beforehand, they're not strong enough to disrupt that. And you really only want to do this in places where you have a small amount of Aquasoil there and you don't want that small amount to move around too much. Obviously it's never going to be perfect, but it does help out. So that looks good. This piece of hardscape is going to come back in a bit. I'm going to move that guy to the side. Hopefully I don't forget that, because I do forget it sometimes. So remind me if I forget. I think now we're ready to add the plants to the Gundam, and then we'll do the rest of the Scape. So I'm going to use some Monte Carlo here. With this little amount of Aquasoil, I can see it just kind of floating up. Hopefully the smaller granules, the extra fine UNS Aquasoil, will make sure that the plants don't uproot themselves, because Monte Carlo is known to just kind of uproot itself over time. What we could do is just take one of these rocks too and smash part of the stem down. Monte Carlo is semi easy to grow. I think a lot of people say it's a beginner plant, but unless you have a lot of carbon and really nail down your nutrients, I find that it doesn't always grow super fast underwater. If you do a dry start, it seems like it does really well, and then when you fill up the tank, it can start having some algae issues. Just because Monte Carlo usually likes a lot of light, but then algae loves light too, so sometimes it starts having some algae issues on it. And in Sequoia National Park, actually there's not a lot of plants. A lot of the dirt and stuff was just barren. And you get ferns and stuff growing out of the dirt once in a while, you know, and some other plants too, but it wasn't covered in plants. Like the ground cover was very sparse compared to some other places I've been. So we're gonna try to mimic that here. We're not gonna go too crazy with all of the plants. So I have this Monte Carlo growing in some dirt. Behind the tank here, I'm just dipping the Monte Carlo in some water and swishing it around to get the dirt off. Monte Carlo is super easy to grow on your own, so if you just have a little tray of dirt and plant the Monte Carlo in that, it'll grow for sure. I do want this tank looking pretty wild, pretty, not chaotic, but uncontrolled, I would say. So I'm not worried about getting a carpeted tank or anything like that. I just want it to be sparse with plants, but also the plants looking pretty healthy at the same time. That's gonna be kind of tough. So I'm gonna be also adding some Riccia Fluitans. And a lot of times people like wrap it on rocks and stuff. I'm gonna try gluing it. Once again, I don't know if this is gonna work. We're gonna find out. Very small dab. Take my junk tweezers. Put it right on the super glue. Planting like this, you kind of never know if it's going to stay or not until you add water in. But since we have some here, we want some close by somewhere. A lot of times plants in the wild grow in the same spot, kind of dispersed in the same area, so we're going to try to do the same thing. And we don't want it all on one side, so we're going to try to get it on this side as well. I'm going to also jam it in with the Monte Carlo. This stuff has been growing on some darker Aquasoil, so I'm going to try to hide the darker Aquasoil underneath this log. Just like that. That looks good. Some of this stuff you're not going to see right now, but hopefully as it grows, it kind of pokes itself out from behind the logs. So I'm just putting some back here, and then hopefully it grows out over time. Do one last spot somewhere over here just to balance it out a little bit. I'm gonna use my finer tweezers to poke it in. If you have a crevice that the moss will just kind of jam into, you don't have to worry about it. You just jam it in there. You don't need to glue it or anything. It'll stay. All right, I got some Anubias here. This is Anubias, not a Petite. I've been growing. And this is just gonna hopefully look like some of the random foliage that was growing around the trails and stuff. Maybe like a fern or something. We do not want to bury Anubias nana, any Anubias at all. We want to make sure that the rhizome stays. You can glue it down. I'm trying to find a spot I can just kind of jam it into and have it stay. If you really want it in a certain spot, you can just super glue it down. And with Anubias, if you find a piece of leaf or a root that's kind of dying, you just take it off. It won't survive anyways, and then it'll just take energy from the plant. So a lot of times you can just pluck it off, or you can take your scissors and cut it off. I don't think that's gonna stay. So I want it there. I'm gonna glue it down. Small dab of super glue. When you super glue something down, you want to make sure that the leaves aren't going to catch your tweezers as you let go. So I always get the leaves off the tweezers first. And then sometimes it's easier just to use your finger or the back of the tweezers just to get it in the right spot. That looks pretty good there. And that'll dry. We want to make sure we spray down this. So we want to make sure the Anubias and all the plants don't get too dry, really. It's struggling here, so I'm just going to cut it off. You can see this leaf is having a kind of a hard time, so it's going to go bye-bye. Boom. We have one back there. As I mentioned before, usually plants of the same type kind of grow in similar areas. So we're going to stick this one over here. This one's already attached to a lava rock, so I can kind of hide it behind his foot here. That looks good. So this next one's a Bucephalandra Catherinae green. These actually arrived way too early, and what I mean by that is that Boost plant is just on it, and I had to get pulled away and was running around trying to get this tank done because these plants arrived within 2 days. I thought it was going to take 5. Anyways, this stuff is just like Anubias nana. You don't need to plant it within the soil. You want to trim any dying leaves off. I have some dying leaves just because I got it in the mail and I wasn't ready, so it just went in a random tank. And that random tank wasn't the greatest for this type of plant, so it's looking a little worse for wear, but it'll hopefully recover here coming up. Put one over here. This kind of looks nice. Ooh, maybe I'll glue it to this rock. Once again, a small dab of super glue. And you can put the rhizome or just like the stem part of the plant right onto the super glue part. Super glue there, stem plant here. Just make sure you angle the plant the way you want it when you put it down on the rock or on the super glue. And I held it there for about 10 seconds. Oftentimes that's enough, but sometimes, especially with this Gorilla Glue, you might need to hold it down there for 20 to 30 to 40 seconds. This time it seemed to be enough, so that's okay. That looks good. What I'm trying to do is hide the line of the wood here because it was just chopped in a straight line and that doesn't look natural, right? So we're just going to try to hide that by putting plants in front of it and just making it look more interesting. So there we go. On this side, there's going to be another one here. I have just like a rhizome without any leaves on it. We're going to stick this one back here. I'm going to stick it right there. Hopefully it grows. I don't know. We'll find out if it grows. I don't know. Looks too weird. I don't like that. We're going to hide our shame. We're going to put it somewhere you can't see it right now, but if it does grow, the leaves will poke out. I want to add one right between his legs here, so I'm going to glue it down. 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000, 9, 1,000, 10, 1,000. There we go. This leaf isn't looking great, so it's gonna go get chopped. Make sure I spray the tank again. We got one last one that looks pretty large. I think I'll put the larger one on this side somewhere. Oh, it's so hard to tell. Where do I want this guy? It'll be over here. These plants look like ferns to me. The Bucephalandra. This looks like just some, the Monte Carlo looks like just some bushy plants that are growing randomly in the soil. The mosses kind of look like lichen or just general mosses. And the Anubias, because they're in the valley, are only in this valley. And that just gives the idea that these plants can only grow within the valley instead of being exposed to the direct sun if they were outside of the valley. That's the idea I'm going with. We'll find out if it looks good later on. But I'm going to go to your side because, once again, I'm scaping from the top down. It's always a good idea to check it out from the front. And let me go do that. So it looks pretty good. I'm going to clean the glass so you can see a little better still. And I always found these curved tweezers to be a little better at cleaning glass. Just because you can angle them down like this, and then only the paper towel will be touching the glass instead of the tweezers. The straight ones kind of end up hitting the glass as well, and you don't want to scratch the glass and stuff like that. So these angled tweezers seem to do a lot better at doing that. I did not forget this guy. Proud of myself. So this last plant's called Egeria Densa. It's gonna go on the back. I like it. I think it looks like little evergreens, so that's why I chose to put it in here. Hopefully it looks a little bit like some of these burnt trees, or like the saplings of these little burnt trees. And then also some plants, evergreens in the back going on here. So we'll do that. I need a battery change, so give me a second. Woo! Okay, let me clean this off. Better. Alright, so this last plant's Egeria Densa. Just gonna be planted in the back here. This plant has really delicate stems. So I'm gonna make a hole in the soil first and then push the plant down into the hole. What I mean by that is I'm just gonna take my tweezers, move them around so that there's just a little bit of a divot. There's water here so the divot doesn't stay, but when it's semi-dry there's a hole that stays. And then once the plant's all the way down into the soil, I'll just push the soil around and fill up the hole. Filling up the tank with water and then planting that way, I found is also better. If you're dealing with like really delicate stem plants, the soil just moves away from the stem just a lot better, and then it's just easier to plant when it's full of water, when the stems are super delicate. I'm using the nicer tweezers this time, as you can see, and these are straight, not curved. The straight tweezers are always a little easier to use and plant stem plants with, because you can have the stem follow the line of the tweezer straight up and down and hold it like that. Then you put the stem in, down, and the tweezer will support the stem as you push down. Then you let go and release the tweezer, and I like to shake it a little bit as I come up, and then that usually just leaves the plant in the soil without pulling it out. Once again, I'm going to make a little hole because these stems are delicate. Grab the next stem. This is what I mean by the Aquasoil likes to stick to the tweezers. There's like serrated tweezers that do it a little less, but I feel like no matter what you do, it's just going to happen. So once again, grab the stem plant in line, parallel to the tweezers. Have it flush with the point of the tweezer. I already made that hole. I'm going to push down into the hole, holding the plant, not squeezing super tight, just enough. And 90% of the time this works. If not, then you can just do it again, not a big issue. So pushing down as far as I want to go. You can wiggle as you push down. And letting go and shaking the tweezers a little bit and like close open really fast as I bring it up. I find that just helps prevent the soil from sticking too much, and then bringing the plant up with the tweezers. And then smushing the soil back into place around the plant. And as if you fill up the tank with water, it'll do that on its own. We're going to stick with the rule of odd numbers. Usually you want to put everything in odd numbers. When you have a lot of things like these rocks and stuff, you don't have to worry about counting too much. But when you have, I'd say under 12, then you want to stick to that hard number rule. Why 12? I just picked that number randomly, not a big issue. You just don't want to have an even number, because that'll make it look a little unnatural. If your goal is to make it look unnatural and really organized, kind of like a Dutch style, then maybe you want to use even numbers. But if you want to look really natural, usually odd numbers is the way to go. All right. I think we did it. We're going to fill it up with water. Get it going. Okay, I figured I'd show you how I like to fill up my tanks when Escape's really complicated like this and you don't want to mess everything up. Sometimes the paper towel will pull stuff up, but you just got to be careful while you take it out. But I like putting a paper towel in. Sometimes two. And then I just take a strainer, put that on top. And if the strainer's angled this way, the water will mostly go that way. If it's this way, it'll come back. So we want it angled this way a little bit, so it goes to the front a little bit. We have a lot less plants up front, so it's not as big a deal to replant those. All right, the planting is all done. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Let's just talk about what we're going to be doing with the tank for maintenance and just from now on. There will be a filter on the back here. Hopefully it's hidden by this piece of rock or piece of wood here. And then I'll also be injecting CO2 into this one, just because a lot of the plants like CO2. We don't have a lot of plants, and in order to combat the algae, I'll be putting some CO2 in there. If we had more plants, I'd be less worried about algae, but we have sparse plants, which is great for the Scape. Also just means we will be dealing with algae issues, and we know that's coming along. I also don't know how the burnt wood will be doing and how the Gunpla will be doing in the tank and how that'll affect the water parameters. I used a clear coat on the Gunpla that hopefully prevents any leakage of chemicals or anything into the water column, but I'll be testing things along the way, and I'll let you guys know how things are going. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you like this one, give it a like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see updates on this tank or more builds like this. Keep scaping. We'll see you later. Bye now.